like the two women who will be at home with us tonight. That is Congresswoman Val Demings and activist Mercii Thomas. Now, I want you to pay close attention. I want you to see this video. This video is a little graphic in a couple of places, so the babies need to just go look in the opposite direction. But I think it's something that we need to see. We need to watch, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
From the beginning, everything was set up for us not to survive. We were meant to survive as units of labor. We were meant to survive as commodities. Society's views toward Black women are framed through these particular images. She's aggressive, violent, out of control. That's all we are. It flies in the face of the reality of who we are. For decades, all we wanted was to be accepted and visible instead of invisible. The only way that can happen is if we ensure that it happens by creating our own narrative and knowing our own stories. You have to be able to give words to it, give names to it. If you don't tell your own story, somebody else will. By telling our own stories, there's a kind of fierce independence of mind, of will, tenacity. No matter what stands in our way, no matter how hard it gets, still we rise. There's nothing more beautiful, brave, unbossed, open, independent, strong, divine. I think that Black women are divine.
Let me tell you, it is a powerful new documentary that'll be out on June 19th for Juneteenth. It talks about how Black women are the most disrespected human being in the United States. And many voices will be sharing in that documentary. But what caught me, besides all of the images that we saw in that video, that we were supposed to be just units of labor, not humans, but units of labor. And at the end of that trailer, it says, it's important for us to tell our stories. So I want you to welcome Congresswoman Val Demings into the room tonight. I want you to welcome her. Welcome home, Congresswoman Val Demings.
It's great to be with you, Bishop. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, doing well. So if our stories are powerful, what's Valdez B. Demings' story beyond being Florida born, graduate, undergraduate, and graduate degrees, beyond the police academy, beyond being a beat cop, beyond being a chief of police, beyond being a congresswoman? What is it about Val Demings' story that's important today?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I so appreciate this opportunity to participate in this wonderful women's leadership session, the first virtual. And I have thought, since you and I talked weeks ago, about the meaning of the word Selah, that we should just stop and just take a pause, take a breath, and think about who we are and whose we are, and where we've come from and where we are going. As you know, Bishop, I grew up poor, Black, and female in the South. My mother was a maid and my father was a janitor. But I refused along the way, facing injustices and discrimination and a lot of obstacles and barriers. I refused along the way to allow my present circumstances to define who I was and who I could be and my potential forever to come. And so I just remembered that God had given me a tremendous foundation on which to build. And it's great to have served as the first woman police chief. It's great to be serving in my second term in Congress. It's great to have been chosen as an impeachment manager. It's great to be considered for even more. But I am not defined by my position. I am defined by God saying that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, that there is no obstacle that confronts me. While I may be nervous sometimes and afraid sometimes about the unknown and the uncertain, there is no obstacle that can define me, or no obstacle that can keep me in a certain place, because God has created all of us for greatness.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So in this season of your life, Congresswoman, what do you see are the greatest issues facing Black women today?
You know, I was watching the portion of the documentary, and there is absolutely no doubt at all that Black women are the most disrespected. I think about the Women's March over 100 years ago now, and how Black women had to press their way to be a part of fighting for equal rights. And along the way, whether it was civil rights or voting rights or equal rights, even when we were not given the microphone, Black women was always there, really the strength and the backbone, if you will, of every major movement in this country. And so here we find ourselves again, knowing that racism was the ghost in the room 400 years ago, racism and discrimination, but it still continues to be the ghost in the room today, as we find ourselves dealing with police misconduct, and we find ourselves still dealing with lack of economic development in our communities, substandard housing, substandard in education in too many places, certainly the lack of health care. And we've seen that play out in COVID-19. Of the 112,000 people who have died as a result of COVID-19, we know that the overwhelming majority of the people who have died are people of color. And so as we've come a long way, there's no doubt about that. But when we look at the present circumstances, we are quickly reminded that we still have a long way to go.
How do you, one of the questions that we lifted in our room is, how do you keep holding up when everybody and everyone is trying to hold you down? You are an elected female of African descent in hostile territory every day. Every day.
And you know, Bishop, just as we saw our first Black president reminded almost daily that he was Black, we still see that today.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, you know, as I said earlier, I grew up poor Black and female in the South, and my mother and father taught me a long time ago when people would call me names. I was 4 years old the first time I was called the N-word, and I can remember along the way people who did not look like me telling me that I could not make it, that I didn't have the right last name, that I wasn't the right color, I wasn't the right gender, I wasn't smart enough, I didn't know the right people. But my mother especially taught me to ignore that and not allow other people and their foolishness and their insecurities, those who are threatened, not by where I was at the time, but where I could go during the time to define who I was. And so I just learned to lean on God's unchanging word and his unchanging hand. And I am sure if it were not for my faith, I'm not sure where I would be when people were telling me, no, you can't be, but the scriptures telling me, oh, yes, you can. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so when the adversity would come, when people would try to discourage me, and along the way, you know, when you try something big, having the courage to try something big and maybe not succeed in the first time. I remember the first time I ran for Congress in 2012, I did not win, but I was not afraid to win, and I was not afraid to lose.
Wow.
I had prayed about it. I knew that I was doing exactly what God needed me to do. And we think about, as women especially, how often courage prevents us from getting out of our comfort zone and trying something new. And if we don't do that, we will never be able to be all that God intended us to be. So really having the ability to shut out the negative talk, which is always there, by the way, and believing that I really can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And if I don't do it today and I fall down, I just need to get back up as quickly as I can and try harder the next time and use the lessons learned from the setback. And looking at setbacks is just a setup for success. We have to learn to try and try again, and we will be exactly where God wants us to be.
Wow. Now, Congresswoman, how do you keep from being exhausted when in reality, we've been trying and trying and trying again for 4 centuries, and we still haven't gotten what we've been looking for 450 years? How do you keep from being exhausted, and where do you find that strength? I know it's your faith, but where do you find whatever you need to find to keep going? Because half of us online tonight, we tired.
Yes.
And depending on your age group, you're going like, all right, we're going through this again. You know, here we go again. And the younger you are, this is your first time around. How do you keep from being exhausted?
You know what? I think as women, we have just been conditioned to really do it all. You know, we do it all. We take care of our families. We take care of our parents. We take care of other, you know, of our coworkers and those around us, our friends. And we find ourselves at the end of the day looking in the mirror like, I forgot in my long list of people I was taking care of today, I forgot about taking care of me. But we don't do a good enough job of asking for help. I remember a few years ago when I was the police chief and I was a deputy chief and I wanted to be promoted to police chief. And I knew in order to be promoted to chief, I needed to go to the FBI Academy. And at that time, my sons were, still at home, and I had to be gone to Quantico, Virginia for 3 months. And I remember coming up with all of the excuses in the book. If I go, then who's going to do this and who's going to do that? And 3 months is a long time. And then it just hit me that you have extended family who loves you. You have friends who love you and want to see you succeed and want to see you move to the next level. Why don't you do a better job at asking for help? We don't do a good enough job there. And we know everybody's busy, but think about if we share the load. If we share the load, then the load gets lighter, right? And then we all can celebrate when each person succeeds and moves a little farther to their goals and accomplishing their objectives and their goals. We need to learn to ask for help more. The other thing that we need to do, I realized that, especially when I was a chief and then running for Congress and becoming a member of Congress, finding time to take care of me. And I started putting it on my calendar. Because I noticed what I put on my calendar, I will do. I will accomplish it. If it's not on my calendar, then it just kind of, plays second fiddle. But I started scheduling me time. Now, I had to get up an hour earlier in order to get that done. But when we think about what faces us each day, we have to remember that we're worth it. We have to remember, if we don't take care of ourselves and if something happens to us and we don't ask for help, what's going to happen to all the people who love and adore us and need us in their lives to make it? And so making time for ourselves, that's saying, put your mask on first, because you cannot help anybody else without taking care of yourself. Ask for help. Your friends and family want to be there for you.
Ooh, you notice I sat back and went like, ooh. So all the A-type personalities, put your hands together and say, yes, yes, yes. If you don't put your hands together, A-type, say, me, she got 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 me. Asking for help. Many times, Congresswoman, as women, we buy into the stereotypes that have been handed us. And even though the stereotypes keep coming, and maybe we're the opposite of the stereotype, sometimes we buy into it. We buy into it. So we are the strong Black woman that doesn't need help, so we never ask for help. We can handle every job. We can change the world without makeup, a mani and a pedi before 9 a.m.
And you're right, Bishop. It's amazing. You think about the world, whether it is in the workplace, whether sometimes it's in our place of worship, whether it's in Congress or other groups or organizations that we find ourselves a part of. Sometimes, right, we fool ourselves into believing that we will somehow appear weak if we don't do it all, right? That's kind of I remember when I was appointed the police chief, and I'll tell you this quick story. When I was appointed chief and I was the first woman, I remember when I would go outside of the police department and men and women would say to me, "Oh, congratulations. Now, that's a big job." And I would respond, "Well, thank you. And it is a big job." Then the next day, it's pretty much the same thing. Men and women would say, "Well, we're so proud of you. That's a big job." I said, "Well, yeah, it is a big job. That's true. It's a tremendous job." And I'm thinking about the 1,065 people that I have to help me do this job. But, this is that self-talk, right? It's a big job. And then went a little further and another person said, "Well, that's a big job." And it finally hit me. My response was, "Well, you know what? You're right. It is a big job. But let me just say this. The job did not get any bigger because a woman is now in it. It's been a big job for 132 years. But because I have been appointed for a time such as this, those 1,065 people that also work with me, they're going to help me do this big job that I have." And so we have to be, it's almost like always being on guard and not allowing ourselves to be ambushed by people who will appear well-intended. They're saying congratulations, right? But really what they were saying is, well, that job is, that's your job, and that job is too big for a woman, and certainly a Black woman. And so we cannot take the bait when that happens to us. We ought to say, yeah, it's a big job. It's always been a big job, but I have been appointed for a time such as this, and I got it because I got a lot of help. I got a lot of back to help me do this big job.
Absolutely. Did y'all tweet that? Did y'all write that down? Are y'all tweeting that comment right there? Did y'all? It's always been a big job for 152 years and it didn't get any bigger. Did y'all? I hope y'all wrote that down and tweeted that one out. Congresswoman, these are tough times and there are a lot of challenges that are on the plate. I've been saying that we're in the middle of 3 pandemics, the global health pandemic, an economic pandemic, and now an ongoing racial pandemic, which never really stopped. It just went underground. But now it's been called out with a vengeance. What needs to happen in Congress to help mitigate, alleviating some of the burdens that these 3 pandemics have upon us now?
Bishop, you're so correct. I mean, COVID-19 was something we had never seen before, which required us to do some things we had never done before. We passed the $2.2 trillion relief package and then came back with a $3 trillion relief package to try to help families and working people and our small businesses. You know that small businesses really employ 70% of the people in our communities. And then, as you've mentioned, the economic, just the economic inequities that exist in our communities all over the nation. And then, boom, George Floyd, the name we had never heard before, but will now never forget. And you're so correct. Racial discrimination, racism, as I've said before, has been the ghost in the room. And through the different movements that we've seen in this country, the civil rights movement, there were those who beat it back, and we got the Civil Rights Act of 1965 passed, and then the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But through the years, we realized that racism is one of those isms that we can never take our eyes off of. We had, as I said earlier, our first Black president who was reminded daily that he was the Black president. On the night that he was elected, there were those who said, we got to work hard to make him a one-term president. And usually we celebrate at least the first night, the election of the president. And so we've seen, as I said, George Floyd, and what happened to him was brutal and senseless and murder. And we have to hold those who were responsible accountable, because we are a nation of laws. No one's above the law, but doggone it, no one's below the law either. And so in Congress, we have to look at ways that we can pass legislation. We have introduced the Justice and Policing Act, where we can develop federal guidelines for police agencies to give them standards as it pertains to hiring, as it pertains to diversity. Police departments should reflect the diversity in the communities in which they serve. As it pertains to use of force, knowing how to go through the force continuum and make sure that deadly force is the last resort. We have to look at training officers and who's training new police officers, because remember, they set the standard for what's acceptable and unacceptable on the street. And so we're looking at federal guidelines, whether it's a 10-person agency or a 36,000-person agency. Let's look at some guidelines that will help govern them and continue to professionalize the profession, if you will. But also, I started the day after Mr. Floyd died with a public appeal to law enforcement agencies. There are 18,000 of them. I spent 27 years at one of them, to start looking at themselves from the inside out. Don't wait for the federal government to have to come in and tell you what to do. There is change that you can make right now, like banning neck restraints, any restraints, whether it's chokeholds or, my God, putting your knee on a person's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds was just ridiculous. Yes. But banning chokeholds, every agency, neck restraints, could do that right now. And we've seen several agencies that have already begun that process. However, it still needs to be codified in law. We also, our Department of Justice can play a major role by having a law enforcement office of standards and training that will help to assist agencies, regardless of their size, throughout the nation, and then really getting serious about civil rights investigations through the Department of Justice. Those are things we're working on in Congress right now. As you know, we had a hearing this past week. We'll be back this week to do what we call a markup on the bill, so we could offer amendments to get it exactly where we need it to be. But this, as you see, the demonstrators in the street, this is a different time for us. As I'm sure Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young and others had that tipping point. This is a tipping point, and this is a different time, and we will not go back. We will continue to move forward with the help, with the faith-based community, with police departments, with civic leaders in our community, with our young activists and others. We're going to keep working until we get this right. We all can do better.
Oh, absolutely. I've been saying over and over and over again, people saying, oh, I can't wait to get back to a normal. Then say, no, it's never going to be normal. It's going to be a new normal. I don't want the new normal. I want a better normal. I mean, that's my rally cry. We can, and we don't have to wait for the normal to emerge for us. We can create our better normal. We can do it. We have the power within us to do it. There's some questions that have come from some of our Selah viewers, and we're going to get them up on the screen. And while those questions are coming, Congresswoman, there's some other things that I'd like to ask for. And, because it's good to be mad, but there's something else that has to come after mad, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm mad, but I got to organize. I'm mad, I got to protest. I'm mad, I got to march. I'm mad, I have some suggestions. I don't know whether in law enforcement, they do psyche evals before hiring, and then every 5 years have psych evals, or a database of officers who have been fired or have been written up for deadly force or excessive force that will follow them all the days of their lives until they come to dwell together somewhere else. What's the possibility of those things happening?
Bishop, you're so right. A matter of fact, the database for police misconduct, as well as a database to show when officers are fired, arrested, or whatever from another agency, are two of the things that are in the Justice and Policing Act. So they're there. Because we've heard too many tragic situations where an officer was fired from one agency and was hired by another agency. Now, I have to say, agencies are responsible for doing thorough backgrounds, but certainly having a national database would be a major step to make sure that bad cops cannot run from one agency to the next. Back to the psychologicals, and let me say this, it's the larger the agency, you have training departments. Every officer, every recruit, every candidate has a psychological evaluation. And one of the things that I implemented when I was at the Orlando Police Department is called an early warning system, which is a way to officially and formally track behavior with officers where there may be red flags or some warning signs, so we can make sure we order them to have another evaluation or go for counseling or pull them out of their assignment and pull them off the street and make sure that they get, whether it's training, counseling, or maybe a separation from the agency. But many times the size of the agency determines whether those things are done. That's why we're trying to develop these federal national guidelines that will govern whether you're small or large, that you will go through the same process as it pertains to hiring, early warning systems, databases, and training. And so we're excited about what's in the Justice and Policing Act.
One of our Selah women are asking, what will be the hot button issues in this upcoming election? And will we be able to have November elections? And besides registering to vote and checking to make sure you are still a registered voter, what do they need to do to be sure that their vote and their voice is counted in November?
Well, and I really appreciate that question. And, if we think back to 2016, we said that 2016 was the most important election in our lifetime. And let me say that it It was. And I would just ask everybody who has joined us tonight to just think about the last 4 years and your agenda, things that are priorities for you. And you've either seen them accomplished in the last 4 years or you have not. If you have not been satisfied with what you have seen, then you need to make sure, and what we are trying to encourage people to do that come from states that have absentee ballots. In Florida, it's unconditional. If you request an absentee ballot, you don't have to be out of town or out of the country or out of state to request an absentee ballot. If you request one, you get one. Some states do have conditional absentee ballots, but if you can request an absentee ballot, request that ballot, even if you are able to go to the polls on election day. For me, I like to go and stand in line at the polls because it's symbolic for me. I think about the men and women who fought for me to have that right. And but we don't know where we'll be in November. We don't know what's going to be going on with COVID-19. We've heard rumors that there could be another surge in the fall. We need to be proactive and not wait. We certainly don't want a repeat of what we've seen in Georgia this past week, and certainly what we saw in Wisconsin with persons standing in the line in a public health pandemic, and the number of cases that we saw, the rise in cases after Election Day. And so vote by mail. We are really pushing a national initiative for persons to vote by mail. We've also, in the CARES Package 1, designated funding for the United States Postal Service to make sure that they have the infrastructure that they need in place to be able to handle the added workload of more people. We hope many more people are voting by mail. And then the other part, if you know someone, just don't think about yourself, because usually people who are in our circles, they vote. Maybe there are some coworkers. Maybe there are people that you run into in the mall or in the grocery stores. Ask everybody if they are registered to vote. Have they received their absentee or requested an absentee ballot? We need to make sure that everybody who can vote does everything within their power to vote, especially in this upcoming presidential election.
Wonderful. Then another Selah viewer, and we've invited the brothers tonight. This is family night. This is family night for our first Selah at home. Usually, it's just the sister girlfriends together, and we're talking and dialoguing and resourcing each other and strengthening our own leadership and our personal lives and our faith life as well. But we have invited the brothers to come in and to be with us tonight. And yay, brothers, hello, we're in the struggle together. We're working this deal together. Here's the question. It says, Congresswoman, what are your thoughts on COVID-19 preparation and how is your state handling it?
Well, I think that, and I too join you, Bishop, in celebrating the few good men who are joining us tonight. That's always a pleasure. We know they have our backs. Yes. And Florida, I'm from Florida, as you well know. And let me say this. The Surgeon General in Florida declared a public health emergency on March 1st. Yet it was not until April 3rd, over a month later, that the governor issued a stay-at-home order. Now, I thank God for the people, the individuals all over our state who took it upon themselves, absence any clear direction, to really start practicing social distancing, recognizing the CDC guidelines, wearing masks when they had to go out, limiting the amount of times they did go out, really sheltering in place and sheltering at home. But then between March 1st and April 3rd, we also had spring break, and we saw people in Florida on our beaches. The beaches were not shut down. They were partying like it's, what's that, 1999. Mm-hmm. And so in the absence of leadership and clear direction, we're really good. Just give us some direction and tell us what to do. We are continuing to see, while the numbers are not anywhere near what was originally predicted in Florida. As you know, we started opening our state back up The last theme park, Disney, will open on July 11th.
Yeah.
They have taken great care to get their parks ready. However, we are seeing a slight increase in COVID-19 cases in Florida.
Mhm.
And so with that, we're still looking at hospital capacity. We're looking at testing capacity. We're now everyone who wants a test can actually get a test, but we need to make sure that we're able to handle any major increases in cases. So we still have to be strategic. We're still working from home where we can and practicing our CDC guidelines when we go out. Now, some are in denial, but for the most part, people here are getting it right. Too many are not, and we still have to be very, very careful and watch our numbers.
Yeah, it seems that they have politicized face mask, and when I get up to the grocery store and I have my face mask and I encounter someone who doesn't have one on, I make a very concerted effort that they know that I am moving around them, and how we know how to give a certain look, right? For them to understand
Yes,
that,
we do.
no,
Yes.
no, that's the look. Now you can look back at me all you want, but I'm trying to stay alive. Congresswoman, thank you for your time tonight. This is awesome.
Thank you.
I don't know if y'all can put hearts, thumbs up, wave, wave somewhere, whatever you do. Put a comment in the chat section and thank Congresswoman Val Demings for being with us tonight and gracious with her time. And I hope she comes back again.
I will. Invite me.
All of your church members from what church in Orlando, Florida?
St. Mark African Methodist Episcopal Church in Orlando, Florida, under the leadership of Pastor Terrence Renard Gray.
All right. The AME in the house, AME in the house. We can't let you go unless we get at least one ooh from our soror, Val. The Deltas have just been loading up the comment line anyway. They've just been saying hello to sorors from all over the country. Yeah, that's right. Hello, throwing signs up on Selah. Throwing signs up. Now, all our pink and green sisters, we love you. Yes, we do.
We love you too.
We love all our Zetas. We do. We love all our Sigma Gamma Rhos. We love you. And now that I started that as a Alphas, we love you. Kappas, we love you.
Omegas, I'm married to one.
We love you. We love you. Everybody who wears the color of the blood of Jesus Christ. We love you all. We love you all. We love you all. We love you all. But thank you for being with it. Okay, look at they ski-weeing all over the place now. See, okay, oop and ski-wees all over the place. Hello. We're glad that you're in the house. Congresswoman, we're going to be praying for you.
Thank you, Bishop.
We like to back each other up, don't we? Yes, we
do.
Sisters backing sisters, brothers backing brothers, brothers backing sisters, and sisters backing brothers. If you are a leader, there's a target on your back every day. If you are a leader, whatever decision you make, half the people will be happy and the other half will be unhappy. And so we're going to be praying for you. We're going to be praying for your right now, and we're going to be praying for your next.
Thank you, Bishop. God bless you. Thank you so much.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Now I want you to welcome into the room a young activist by the name of Mercii Thomas. Come on into the room, Mercii Thomas. Mercii is an educator, school teacher, who is known by her students as Coach T. She is a certified yoga instructor and is an activist who just happened to be in Denver, Colorado one day. Life came marching by her window, and she did what? Welcome into the room. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to share in stories. It's a really important part of how we create our ecosystems and our culture. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us what happened that fateful day.
Well, we had some conversations amongst friends about what people in our generation would have done during the civil rights movement. And people often say, if you were ever wondering, now is the time. So on Saturday, May 30th, I was staying at a downtown hotel in Denver. and I could hear and I could see from my window the people marching by. And I just couldn't look away. So I grabbed my backpack, my outdoor large group COVID supplies, and without a sign in hand or even really a plan, I left my hotel room and joined the march without even knowing where we're going. And we ended up at the Capitol building. And we were able to walk around really proclaiming the message that Black Lives Matter in some of the most diverse and honest ways that we could at the time, and just in response to a lot of the hurt that has often been felt here in the Denver community as well. And at the time, Denver had issued a curfew, and the people of Denver were very adamant about resisting that curfew, because much like they were out resisting the force and the militarization that they were responding to, particularly as they were just protesting the need for justice and accountability, they wanted to really exercise their right to just be present and to be heard. And that's what really compelled me to go out. The least I could do is share in the chorus of voices saying that Black lives at the minimum matter. Like, this is a bare minimum. So time marched on as we did, and we ended up back at the Capitol building. And this is closer to curfew, so and we tried our best to remain calm. I could hear people asking officers, some could be identified, some not, what would happen at curfew, and they would just shrug their shoulders and they would not say anything to us about it. In an effort to remain calm, I sat down on the curb and took a yoga seat and started working on some breathing, because it was just a very public and very tense situation. And I needed to figure out what was coming next, like what's the next course of action. And before I could really respond to what happened, the police had advanced the line towards us. And I open my eyes and I see a pair of boots standing in front of me. And they are ordering me to move. And of the many choices as a Black woman that we've been told to respond in those situations, I didn't make a single move. And I closed my eyes, and as I began to shake, I could see, and I opened them up and I saw two more pair of boots, and one officer saying, "Don't make me move you." And then another officer saying, "We just want to make sure you don't get hurt." So I announced that I'm lifting my hands and I'm putting my hands up, and they walk me behind the police line because it's getting closer to curfew, and they begin to push us back and box us in. And at this point, as it begins to get closer, we could see the trucks. The National Guard has already joined the police officers, and they've begun to fire flashbang grenades into the crowd. We're trying to stay on the outside so that we can get out quickly and safely. It's clear there's really no safe exit, and they began to announce that, it's curfew, it's time to vacate, and my hotel is unfortunately on the opposite side of the police line. So it's time to get out somehow. And it occurs to me that I am alone. So I sent my brother my location, and I called him on FaceTime so that he could see me, see what I was wearing. And then I showed him the line of police officers in tactical gear. And they had already begun to fire their tear gas at us and push us further back away from the Capitol. At one point, he told me just to write, his number on my arm. So I was able to grab a marker and write it down. And then while I was writing it down, we got cornered in a war memorial. And just as another symbol of just, we're here to just be resistant. And we're also here because we care about Denver. A few of us protesters were picking up trash that had been left behind in the area. And I guess I got a little too close to the officer, and he began to yell, "Get back, get back." So I got back, my hands were up. We left the trash in a pile, and then we tried to back up slowly, because you don't run from the cops in this kind of situation. At least it didn't feel safe to do so. So as hands were up, it began to feel very surreal, like a video game that I was unprepared for, like some dystopian novel that I had read. It's like three of us on the grass in front of a Capitol building with our arms up, with lines of over a dozen cops in tactical gear pointing what you don't know at you. And we moved slowly, trying to help people off that had been tear gassed and couldn't see. And we end up on the street. And I start to record because there's this really powerful imagery of people on their knees with their hands up, just not just not being moved and just trying their best to just resist and be present. And as people are being pushed back and the cops are coming down the side, it occurs to me that I am now at the very front of the line. Mm. And before I could even realize what happened, there is a group of 4 or 5 white allies who get in front of me and form a barrier, because it occurs to me that the police are pointing directly at me. And then tear gas goes off to the side, about 20 feet from us, and we scatter a little bit. And as we scatter, I can see people on the ground getting cared for by other volunteer medics, people who have been bloodied or gassed or just wounded and down. They're being surrounded and they're trying their best to receive care. But at the same time, there's so much chaos happening that they really can't stay still for very long. And then suddenly another person runs in front of me and they get hit by a rubber bullet. And I said, oh, they're shooting at us now. It's time to go. And how can I get to where I need to be safely? Mm-hmm. Before there was time to respond to that question, I felt a thud and I heard a loud ringing. And I grabbed my head and I stumbled backwards and I fall down to my knees. I said, okay, I've been hit by something. And my hand is warm and I could see blood raining down on the street. I said, okay, this is pretty bad. I get surrounded by people. What happened? What do you need? Have you been tear gassed? No, I saw what happened. She got hit in the head. We got to bandage her up. Before they have time to really get the bandages together, I hear someone come behind me like, I'm so sorry. They're still coming. We need to move. And I look and I see the line of police is still advancing towards us and they're still firing tear gas at the people who are down. So I'm fortunately able to get up and move maybe about 20 or so feet more. And then I have to sit on the curb because it's hard to see because there's so much blood covering the mask. And they kind of do a quick check to see, if I'm still there. Some more volunteer medics show up. They ask what I need. They're getting gauze from just hands all over bags and book bags as people just came prepared to bandage me up. They're getting clotting pads. They're getting water to clear it out because they really can't see, because even though my hair was in a ponytail, there's generally a lot of hair, so it was covering that space. So they're trying to put a clotting pad on and I feel a stinging on my side. And I look and it looks like there's been a pepper pellet that was fired at me while I was being tended on the ground. So I told them, like, I'm sorry, guys, I got to move. So we grabbed our stuff and I grabbed my hoodie that's tied to my backpack and I bundled it up and I pressed it against my head just so I could just slow the bleeding because I wanted to be able to get out there on my own. So I get a little bit farther down and I'm able to hide around a corner because the police are coming down the sidelines too. And most of the ways have been blocked off. There's really difficult trying to get around the police lines and they're not letting the medics through to come help us. So we're helping each other. And the medic says, I'm really sorry, but I got to take a look at it. And he made that. You're going to need to go to the hospital. And I was like, okay, I got it. But we need to sort of stop the bleeding or at least slow it down. So I take the bandana that I tied to sort of slow the tear gas. I made a tourniquet. I tied it on. And then me and a volunteer medic, Blake, I believe, 2 miles to emergency room where I was then seen. So it was a very harrowing experience. Yes. And it is a lot to process that not only was I injured, but in the way in which I was injured by the people you are expecting to protect and the people who are paid to sort of serve your community. But if the response to resistance and disagreement is to crush, then I think we need to consider what is driving these responses. And I'm really hoping that by hearing some of these stories, not just of people being harmed lethally or even harmed non-lethally, as was my case, it's just how then can we start this work where we are no longer sanitizing that part of the tale, that we're having these protests, people are taking a knee, And now we have painted the streets and we've started these conversations. Well, we also had opportunities to hear about a lot of the ways in which we're funding or choosing to not fund these police departments in response to their direct contributions to their communities, or the way in which they're causing significant harm. And some of the ways in which they're causing significant harm might not be a rubber bullet to the head. It might be patting someone down as they're walking into a school because they have a contract, or it might be racially profiling individuals because you driving while Black, because there are so many of us that have those kind of stories. But as I think about the Black women being consistently disrespected and not protected, I feel that on a subatomic level now, because there are so many ways in which I know I am designed to or supposed to care for myself. But if I don't share my story,
That's right.
who will? And when they share my story, how will they share it? And what will be the part that they choose to include? Because to me, it was very significant to have my head bloodied on a street, but then to actually feel now it is unbowed because I actually have to get out of here in order to survive. There was that connection to that ancestral bond that I felt that we often talk about, with that Underground Railroad essence, that ancestral call to freedom. It's like, while you are called to freedom, you're called to survival. Who is calling you to that? So I feel called to our collective survival by acknowledging that we have been brutalized in a lot of different ways. And it's very unfortunate that brutality is a part of my story. It is a part of the awakening of that story, because it creates a very, very tangible, because it's underneath this scarf, reminder of the literal scars that come along with being Black and being a Black woman in this country. It is exceptionally difficult. And yet it is deeply enriching and rewarding when coupled with the active work of living in an active world.
Wow, Mercii. You are quite a young lady, and you are a strong woman, and you have more courage than you realize. And many people don't know how strong they are until they experience what you experience. I thank God that, that you got through this alive, and that there were people you've never known and never met were willing to shield you. I'm talking about white people. White people, you're the only chocolate drop in the group, right? And white people went to protect you because they were aiming at you. And God kept you alive. And
we've seen those type of stories of people playing that interference, but the very real reality of that is you showing up is putting yourself in danger. How much danger are you willing to take for this movement? I unfortunately didn't know until I was placed in that environment. And now that I know, I think they should be more afraid, because there's a fire there that's desired to make some systemic change, because I'm still here.
Yes. And we're going to continue to pray as your body continues to heal, your heart continues to heal, your soul continues to heal. You made a statement about being, it wasn't a small wound, a big wound that happened just by being Black, wounded just by being Black in America. Your story is critically important, and I'm glad the women and the brothers who are online tonight were able to hear your story. Fox News may not tell your story. CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS may not share your story, your whole story. But you shared it with us tonight, and we're most appreciative, because protest is different levels of protest. Some people will be in the street. Some people will write editorials and op-eds. Some people will make critical telephone calls. Some people will have those tough conversations with their colleagues or with their employers. But your story now will be shared tonight with mothers and fathers and daughters and sisters and brothers. And the positive of this story is that you made it out alive. And I know your mom is on the line. She's in the room somewhere. What many of you do not know is that Mercii Subabu Thomas is a daughter of the parsonage. Her parents were pastors in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Dr. Michael and Dr. Debayi Subabu Thomas. And y'all look like twins. Y'all look like twins. Everybody, I'm sure everybody says it. And we also praise God for your big brother, Melik, who went to Denver to bring his little baby sister home. So
he's younger. I have to caper that. I fought to be number 3, so he's number 4. Like,
okay, all right, okay. This is womanhood 101. If they believe that you're younger, you just say thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Come on, let's love on Mercii, please. Share your comments and love on Mercii. Y'all just come on, put some hearts up, put some hands up, send some prayers up, and let's love on Mercii. And we thank you for sharing with us tonight. Y'all keep on coming. Love up on Mercii for her bravery, and then also bravery in sharing her story so that we know what it's like trying to hold on the front line and try to keep holding up when everything seems to be trying to push you down. You keep standing, Mercii. You keep standing. We want to let you know that Selah, the Atlanta edition, of course, has been rescheduled from September to the end of 2021. And that Selah Dallas is still on the books for November 19th to the 21st. And we are planning in faith. Our hotel has told us that we have choices. And the choice is that not to have Selah at all. And you will lose $60,000. Or you can have Selah and we will reduce your room rate and your food and beverage, but you still got to pay $60,000. If you reschedule your event to 2021, you still lose your $60,000, but we'll credit 50% of it back when you do have it in 2021. And so touch your neighbor and say, seriously? Yes, seriously. Some places have been kind and some places have been not. So you see a little icon that's up there. There you go. That's up there, Selah Leadership. You can support us. We want to be a blessing to Mercii tonight. We want to put something tangible in her hand for being our guest, and we want to do that for her. And if you would just cash out Selah, it is right at the top of your screen. We also want to thank our text crew who organize and get the lights and the cameras and do all that stuff. It looks easy. Doesn't it look easy? You just sit here and you just smile and go, hey guys, this is gonna have a great time. But there's a whole lot of hard work that goes on behind the screens there. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who are making sure that everything is up. Please don't forget about the documentary that's coming out on June 19th and that's in parentheses, Invisible. It is a beautiful documentary that features the stories and voices of African-American women. Our upcoming Selah, our next Selah at Home, please let us know if you enjoyed Selah at Home. Comment for us, text us. If any subjects or people that you would like to hear from, please also say that as well. On June the 29th at 7 Central, Dr. Tama Bryant Davis will be in the house. Our subject is going to be, I want my life back. Where do I start? Yeah. So thank you for being a part of Selah. You know, I love you all. Wonderful. I'm happy that all the family was in the house tonight. The daughters and the sons and the mothers and the fathers. I like it. It feels like a family reunion, family being at home. Love you all. Thank you for being with us on Selah tonight. Selah women, you know where we're going next, right? Right. God bless everybody.